Welcome to the What is Stoicism podcast.
In this episode, I talked to Benny Voncken, a writer, speaker, and practicing Stoic who's originally from the Netherlands. He's also the co-founder of an online Stoicism platform called Via Stoica, which offers personalized Stoic coaching services, an online Stoic community, live conversations on X, and their own Via Stoica podcast. I really enjoyed talking with Benny. In the conversation, he shares some of the difficulties he's been through that led to him taking Stoicism seriously as a philosophy of life, and how he now uses that experience to help others in his work as a Stoic coach. I hope you enjoy the episode. So Benny, thanks for joining me. As a brief introduction, you're a writer, speaker, Stoic life coach, and a practicing Stoic. You grew up in the Netherlands, but you've since become a world traveler. What else would you add to that to introduce yourself to anyone unfamiliar with who you are and what you do?
Yeah, that's a good question, and then thanks for having me on and for that nice introduction. I think I've worked as a teacher. I think I call myself a jack of all trade and a master of none, but I'm trying to become a master of Stoicism. When I started on this journey of sharing my journey in Stoicism, I called myself the Stoic Padawan because I like the mix of Star Wars, the Jedi learner. That's still how I see myself, but I think I'm just curious in what the world has to offer. I think that's something I would like to add to that introduction.
Awesome. And so how did you get started with Stoicism? And I'm sort of wondering what it was about the philosophy that resonated with you and made you think, yeah, this is worth putting a lot of my time into studying and practicing.
Yeah, and I put a lot of time in it. Like even when my family they see me reading books for fun, it's usually Stoicism or philosophy related. They don't really get it. But no, I think what really drew me in was just the tone of voice, the pragmatism, the practicality of the philosophy, especially when I was reading Epictetus. I always call it like the verbal slap in the face that I needed, and it just really felt like me. And this is something that I've heard from more people who are looking for a particular philosophy that suits them. That it's just something that speaks to them. The words that people use, the tone of voice, but also the intention that's behind the philosophy. And for me, that really came about when I was going through a divorce. My marriage was going downhill, and I was dealing with alcohol at that moment of life, physical injuries as well that really kept me from I can still walk, but running is pretty much off the table. And so there's some physical injuries there, and that really puts life into perspective. That's when I needed a kind of a guide or some tool to help me get through this in the proper way. And that's when Stoicism came across my path, and I found it. I read Marcus Aurelius' The Meditations in a way that I've never read a book or a story before, because I looked at it through my own lens and saw the application of life there, and that link really made those texts so much more powerful. To read it and then immediately find ways to apply it to your life, and that really kept me going, and just I never stopped since, and hopefully I'll keep doing it, because there's still a long journey ahead.
Yeah, and it seems to be that a lot of people do find it when they're going through something difficult, and it seems to be the thing that they need the most at that time. Um, was it a case for you where you thought maybe you read Marcus Aurelius or some other Stoic text and you thought you had been a Stoic previous to that already? It sort of fitted your attitude in
Oh
that
yeah,
way?
most definitely. And you never hear people like when they're at the top of the hill when they're winning, they say, "Oh, I need to improve myself." That's usually not the moment when people need that. But no, it's definitely that part when I saw myself in those texts, and I started with a book when I really first met the Stoics again. I was reading a book of Introduction into Existentialism. I diagnosed myself into an existential crisis or something like that, and that's where I really found the Stoics for the first time, together with existentialism, absurdism of Camus, and even Epicureanism. So yeah, that's when I found when I really dove in, and yeah, as you said, that's when people need it. And we've been holding live spaces on X with Brandon and Bryce together. We founded Via Stoica now, but we've met a lot of people. surprisingly a lot of women joined us there as well, and they said, "I've been a Stoic and I didn't even know it." As exactly as you said, you read it and you just kind of identify yourself with it. You feel that there's something there that's been inside of you all your life, and people have called me level-headed uh, many times, but now I can actually kind of pinpoint it towards some. I can put a little, more of a direction to it. I think that's really something that helped me.
Yeah, I think I found that too when I read A Guide to the Good Life by
Mm.
William Irvine. A lot of the things he was saying were things that kind of suspected, but hadn't formally come across until that point. Um, do you have any advice for people who want to get started with Stoicism but maybe haven't dove deep enough into study or practice to really understand how it could benefit them?
Yeah, no, and I like that when a lot of people just say read the ancient text, which I think is something that people should do if you really take it serious. But then you have these contemporary texts like the Guide to the Good Life or How to Think Like a Roman Emperor and How to Be a Stoic from Massimo Pigliucci. I think that those are really good books to put side by side. When you read an ancient text, sometimes it's difficult to really get what they were saying. You need a little bit of extra hand and also to put it into modern day life. I actually wrote um, a blog on that, the Stoic Reader's Guide to Beginners, putting like meditations. You read How to Think Like an Emperor by Donald Robertson. When you read Epictetus, you can read How to Be a Stoic. So really putting them together helps put all of those ancient texts into the modern day times. That really helped me. And yeah, it's interesting to see that and everybody has their favorite book, right? If you mentioned, how to be how the Guide to the Good Life. For me, it was like How to Be a Stoic. I really like that, and so everybody has their favorite books to read, but I think that that's a good way to start. Just picking up those books and then delving in deep. Just going in and really seeing what it means to you.
Yeah, a lot of people would probably would usually ask me where to start or what's the best book to read first. But, you know, there isn't really a right or wrong answer to that. You know, as you say, if you crisscross between ancient and modern texts, then you get the original stuff, but you also get a perspective on it from someone who has studied it for a long time. Are there any other resources or favorite modern authors that you have found useful?
Yeah, I'm just reading John Sellers now as well. He's got some really good books on like the Stoicism book is a really, really interesting one to read. But then there's also I like Dying Every Day, Day at the Court of Seneca, where he really, I love history. I love, the philosophy. I think that's also one of the reasons why I like Stoicism so much because Rome is one of my favorite cities. And when you read, the Dying Every Day by George Rom, by I don't know the first name, but Rom is the last name. He really puts it in the perspective of that day when Seneca was at the court of Nero. Really takes you through that journey. It's maybe not as much in the Stoic philosophy, but it really puts everything in perspective. Especially reading the letters by Seneca afterwards, you see where he was coming from, and because Seneca is kind of a controversial person, in the Stoic scene. Was he really Stoic or more of a sophist? But when you read that and you see what he was dealing with, you kind of start to lean a bit more. Like, let's just give him the benefit of the doubt. He was a great writer, and then we can see if we can. There's so much truth and value in that text. So yeah, there's so many books, and even the history books. And just appreciating the fact what meditations actually is. There's this personal diary of an emperor of the Roman Empire back in the day, writing his deepest inner thoughts. They're never meant to be published. For me, that just still stands out from far beyond all the others.
Yeah, it seems to it grows in popularity and it kind of refreshes itself every now and again in popularity, I think. And I don't know if you've read The Inner Citadel by Pierre Hadot, but it really gives a much deeper understanding. Until I read that book, I didn't realize, most of what Marcus Aurelius was actually saying, which was a real eye opener. And just when you're talking about Seneca there too, Emily Wilson has a good book, The Greatest Empire, which I think is probably on the similar lines to Rom's book, is more of a biography of his history and his life. So yeah, I'd really recommend those two if you haven't read those.
No, and the Inner Citadel is like one of those you would read like after How to Think Like an Emperor. I think that's kind of like that one is a little bit easier to digest, and then when you go into the city in a citadel, that's just dives a little bit deeper. But I haven't read that one. What was it called again? The one on Seneca by Emily Wilson.
Yeah, the Greatest Empire
Okay,
called.
that's a,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
really good.
add that one to the list of my own, personal
Yeah, if your
reading list.
list
There's
is as
so
long
many
as mine,
books.
then
Yeah, yeah, it's
yeah,
gonna take a few lifetimes to read all of them.
yeah, we
Right.
just don't have the time.
Yeah, exactly.
But you sort of mentioned about your divorce there and how that was kind of a catalyst for seeking out a different path, or trying to recover from a difficult time. Is there anything else you can share with that as to how that came about and how you eventually came through that?
Yeah, for sure. And that's a big part of why I'm also trying to share my journey, because as a Stoic say, we are trying to, heal and make ourselves like we are the doctor of our own souls, right? But we also have the duty to share to others. So when I was going through that divorce, it was a kind of a lengthy procedure, and to be honest, not a bad one. Like we still on speaking terms, but we knew it was over. But that initial shock, you still see your future dissipating, and you have to really rebuild yourself. And those first few weeks, I was going out drinking way too much as I used to do before, and I was living in Dubai at the time, which is, it sounds really, lavish and great, but it can be a very lonely city, especially if you're there just by yourself or you're broken up. So I went out a lot, and at one point I woke up and I was staying in a hotel room at that time, and I woke up and just hung over, feeling really bad about myself. Looked in the mirror, was like, this is not going to be my life. This is not how I want to proceed. So I made some rules for myself. Quit alcohol, go do the exercise, go get your at least get your physical part in order, because that's something that is easier to control. And that's funny, to talk about control and then reading the Stoics after that. It's like, okay, at least this is something that I can do about it. And that's where I really started to build myself up. I started to go and exercise more, take care of myself, have a goal for the future again. Really look at that, for example, my finances, but also my future plans of work and travel. And then when I saw the Stoics, they really affirmed a lot of the things that I was already doing, but they required me to delve in deeper, to really ask myself, what is really going on? What are your thoughts behind this? Why is this really affecting you? So that was that next step that I really had to take. And from there, I think I've worked after that. I stayed in Dubai for another few years and quit my job, sold everything, and filled up my backpack with all my belongings and started to move around the world. And I've been sober for about 4.5 years, which was a great point. Yeah, great thing to do as well in my life. So yeah, it was a. I always say it was one of the, being in the marriage was one of the best things that happened to me, but getting separated was also one of the best things that happened to me, because it opened my eyes and it showed me, okay, I'm still an individual here. I still have my responsibilities and my agencies, and let's make the best out of life. It's not over yet, even though it seems really bad in the moment. But when I look at it, it was a blessing. So, also be careful with how you label things in that moment, because you might misjudge them.
And like what Seneca said, I think it was, the person who never faces misfortune is unfortunate because they
Yeah.
never have the opportunity to sort of prove themselves or, you know, grow from what they've gone through. So yeah, it's a real example of that, I think. You say you quit alcohol. Um, Presumably there's a lot of kind of health benefits from that, but what have you sort of noticed as the biggest impact to doing that?
Oh, there's definitely a lot of health benefits, but I think mentally the benefits far outreach that. Obviously, as you grow older and you drink, hangovers, they last multiple days. And I used to have migraines, so I kind of grew over them. But as I got hangovers, it felt pretty much similar. And I value my time, as Seneca also says, time is our most precious commodity. You never know how much you have, and whatever's lost is lost. So I felt I want to make sure that I use my time the right way. So for me, probably the biggest thing quitting alcohol was the perception that I thought others had on me, of not being fun anymore, not going out, not being part of it. And luckily, I had some good role models, some good examples from my sister and a cousin. They quit alcohol, and you could see, oh, it's possible. And people still talk to you. You're not going to be an outcast. So that was because when I look at my relationship with alcohol, I never drank alone by myself, but when I went out, with friends, it would just always go into the extreme, where you went blackout and couldn't remember, woke up the next day feeling depressed and hungover. So that was, for me, it was a little bit easier to quit. So that's why when I made that decision, it just felt like a relief. It just felt like, okay, I've again, taken something back from my life. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are kind of peer pressured into drinking more than they would like to. And that's a sad thing, because you are just, again, focusing your own self-worth on the opinions of others. That's another thing that I've learned from the Stoics. I cannot change the opinions of others. Let me just live my life the way I feel like I should be living it. And that really, again, that helped me get over that first step. And I've had other people of my family and friends that say, "Oh, you're not going to be fun anymore," or not inviting me as much to parties. But to be honest, I value my time far more than that. And I've done my partying, I've done my drinking for maybe for a full lifetime. So I've done that chapter, and it was great. I wouldn't have wanted to miss it, as you said. Seneca said that if you haven't been unfortunate, that's unfortunate, right? But I needed to learn that lesson. I needed to get through those steps to be able to become the person that I am, who I am right now. So I also don't have any regrets about it. I've had a great time. The things that I can remember, but it was a good time, and now I really, I've gotten back my time. I can do so much more. I can do a lot of reading. I feel far more focused. Physically, I feel far better. I can sleep better, and I don't have to be anxious about, being invited to a party, because that's what something used to happen. I was like, okay, don't get too drunk. Try to control yourself, while knowing that that was pretty much impossible. But now I go to a party, enjoy myself. Now, when everybody gets drunk, I go home, have a good night's sleep, wake up the next day, and get to do the things that I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's a great thing to have the best of both worlds, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
And there's a sense in which maybe people who are drinking and suffering the hangovers, they want to keep other people in that same circle, so they're not the only ones that are doing it. It becomes difficult to break free from that then.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Like, you're doing it
So
for someone else, right? You're just living someone else's life that they want you to kind of live, because that's how they see life should be lived.
yeah, so you went through a lot of big changes probably at that time. Um, what did the journey look like from beginner in Stoicism to what you do now with Stoic coaching?
Yeah, at the beginning, I felt like I knew it all, right? I think that that's something, you read a couple of texts, and he's like, "Oh, listen, look at me, how well I know this thing." And I went to writing about it a lot, and that was mainly for a few reasons, not to really boast about how much I knew, but one of the reasons was I needed to get my thoughts out, because you start reading about this, you see all the connections that it makes to your life, and your head just kind of explodes with everything that happens. So I felt like I wanted to get it out. And if I write for myself, then it just gets kind of jumbled into all my thoughts crisscross. So I started a blog, again, called the Stoic Padawan at the beginning, which is now all kind of moved to Via Stoica. But the reason that really helped me kind of organize my thoughts far better, because you're writing it for someone, whether they there's someone who reads it, but at least you have that imaginary reader to really make it a little bit more structured. That really helped me get my thoughts in line, but it also helped me research a little bit more. And then to deal with criticism, I figured where to find criticism best, and putting it online. So I just posted my posts on Facebook. There's a lot of Stoic Facebook groups out there, and I was actually surprised by some of the harsh criticism that Stoics can have on each other. And then I felt like, oh, maybe you should apply it a little bit more. And so just posting things there, you get a lot of interesting comments. And at the beginning, yeah, I was stayed up a few nights trying to find the best answer, and because I was right. And as you get through the journey, you start to see more of these comments. Like, okay, wait a minute, maybe I'm not right. Maybe there's something in these comments that I get. So that's when I started to kind of change my view on those things as well. So okay, people have a comment, let me just check it, right? Let me see what's right, and not really place that emotional connection to it, because they're attacking me, they're bad people. No, they just have a different view. And that's when I started to learn more, and really looked at myself at the beginning. It's like, oh, I didn't know much. Maybe I should have waited a little bit more before sharing my thoughts. But again, that was part of my journey. And now I think I'm quite advanced. I can tell just from my own life, right? Just my anxiety levels have dropped. I'm not as overreactive anymore, not overthinking. I can deal with criticism a lot better. I feel like I've become a better version of me, at least. So I'm definitely ahead on my journey, and that's why I wanted to help other people who are, behind. Not necessarily to become Stoics, but to find their way in life. And that's something that I've always said. Like, I'm not here to turn people into Stoics, but if they can build their own philosophy of life, that's great, because that is some, at least they're starting to think about their lives and their priorities and their values, and that's something that I feel we should be doing a little bit more.
Yeah, I feel the same way in that, and it's, I'm trying to share stoicism, how it can help people if it's applied properly, but I'm not trying to convert people to
Mm.
stoics or, anything like that. That isn't really the point of it in the first place. It's to really help people think for themselves. If, you can introduce them to new knowledge and help them ask better questions of themselves too. Um, it's funny what you're saying about being on the internet too. Like, you just need to be on Facebook or Reddit for 2 minutes, and someone will tell you how much better Stoic they are than you. So, yeah,
You've
it's
dealt
a
with
quick
that as
place
well, then?
to, yeah, of course. In the early days, I wouldn't want to look back on some of the things that I probably interpreted in those days, and even getting quotes wrong and things. But then you learn to properly research them and cite the exact reference and things like that, and it improves you ultimately, which
Oh,
is
most definitely,
which is
yeah.
it can only be a good thing.
I had one of my
So
quotes
how did
being misquoted by Gregory Sadler. He reached out as like, "Oh, this quote isn't right." And I was like, "Oh, you're this is like, oh, he's gonna be right. He knows his things, right?" After that, I always put the references. I always, even when I read stuff, I was like, I want to read it myself before I publish it, because you know how picky they can get.
so funny because Gregory Sadler was the same thing happened to me with Gregory Sadler. He called out a quote on Twitter, I think, at one point, and I was like, this guy's victimizing me or something. But of course, he was right. And since then, I looked it up and made sure it was perfect before posting it. So I'm grateful to him for that, very much so.
Hmm.
Um, so, how did you know you were ready to start helping others in this way? Did you have any hesitation at that point, or did you know that you could go ahead and offer your coaching services?
Yeah, I think that's a like I've worked as a teacher for over 12, 15 years. That really helped me as a coach to really, to read student, because teaching isn't just sharing knowledge or making sure that they learn. It's also knowing your students, making sure that they have their minds open to really take in the knowledge, which is a difficult task sometimes. And I did a few coaching courses during the pandemic without even knowing that this was going to be tied in with Stoicism. And after being on this journey, after writing for a while, and I've always had comments about people's like, "Oh, you're a good listener. You really helped me." And I figured I've got to do something with this to help people, especially with the experiences that I've had, going through divorce, with alcohol and all of those things. And yeah, I wrote a page and I reached out, and then people, came to me and they said like, "Hey, we want to hire you as a Stoic coach." And there's always this kind of questions like, "Oh, should I, should?" And even recently, we've had some people like, "Oh, you want to, you're asking for money, to help people, and you should be stoic, and you should do this for free and everything." Is like, okay, we've helped people for free at the beginning, but you can see the level of commitment is not there, right? It is kind of a sad place that you need money to make sure that the motivation is there, but people need it, right? And it also shows a little bit about your services and even the value you put in yourself. But we offer a lot of things for free, right? The podcast, the blogs, we go on live spaces on X, and so we do all of those things. And there are people who need that extra step, that personal guide, to help them just achieve a little bit more. And so when I felt ready, I think I tried to listen to my intuition a lot, and I felt like, yeah, I have gained so much experience in my own practices. My anxiety levels, as I said, they really dropped tremendously. I'm not as overthinking, and I get worried about all these things. I just take things as they go, especially as I've been, traveling a lot, and you have to deal with all of these things, missing a bus here and there, and not getting upset by that or worried, and just taking it as it goes. So at one point, I felt like, yeah, this is the thing that I have to do, and it's not easy, right? Because you're starting from scratch, and we're building something that is not really known out there. People ask like, what is a Stoic coach? Am I getting coached into Stoicism, or so people don't really understand exactly what we're building something new, but it is very satisfactory when you help people and you hear the results that they have in their lives. So that's something that definitely keep going. And I've still got a lot to learn myself, but you're always a few steps ahead of someone else. And if you can drag them along and if you can show them the path, at least setting the right example that it's possible, that's just really, great to be able to do that for other people.
Yeah, I think as you teach, you do learn. I think Seneca even said that somewhere, but
Yeah.
uh, just from what you said earlier too, of writing about Stoicism and learn to research better, and that's how I develop my own knowledge too, of having to look things up and explain them in a clear way, which helps me understand them better myself. And the same thing applies when you're trying to explain something to someone or show them how a certain principle or exercise could help with an issue they're having. Um, is there a general theme for why people seek Stoic coaching, would you say, or is the reason varied for the kinds of things that they're trying to get help with?
It does kind of vary. It's kind of it's a lot of the things have to deal with the relationships they have to externals, like with money, but also when they trying to overcome obstacles in their life, like the dependency on again externals, right? Maybe affection or relationships or substances or these things, but also people who are just kind of stuck in their lives, who need just a little bit of a reboot, and have someone put a different view on their lives, just to look at it from a different angle, ask them the questions that they haven't really thought of. And I've had people where we wanted to go for like I don't know, multiple sessions, and after one or two, it was like, okay, this is kind of this has made so much sense already because it's just a little different perspective on things. So yeah, there's it's a wide range of people. We do get a lot of men, seeking out, which I think it is normal because if you look at who stoicism appeals to, although we've had a lot of women again reaching out in those live spaces, and that was another thing why I felt like coaching and helping people was a good thing to do, because in these conversations we've had so many people reach out to us in the background and say, wow, this space really helped me deal with things in my life, get a different perspective. And so that's when we had that first kind of encounter with people who were struggling and needed some guidance in their life. And you can see that, for example, the religions kind of are fading away. People are looking for community, and something as stoicism or philosophy of life really kind of helps them fill in that void that they feel.
Yeah, that's a good point about people needing a community. And um, do you think Stoicism lends itself particularly well to this kind of supported self improvement? Because I think a lot of people are surprised that Stoicism isn't like an individualistic, pursuit where people are locked away in solitude, pondering their thoughts. It's actually something that places emphasis on our social nature, isn't it?
I always explain when I speak to other people who don't really know what stoicism is, and always at the end I get like, I didn't know that this was going to be such a nice conversation, right? Because it is not what people expect it to be. So I usually start out with, this is kind of a Western version of Buddhism, more practical and pragmatic, but it is exactly that kind of paradox that it has, right? You need to take care of yourself. You need to make sure that you're the best version. Why? Because you have a duty to the world around you, and if you're the best version of yourself, then you can help others. And that is something that people have missed. And there is a lot of the more spiritual philosophies. They have a lot of movement there, and a lot of people really adhere to it, but there's also a large group that don't really connect to that. And that's something that I felt as well. And and that's, there's people who have this mix, but I think that that's why stoicism is really jumping in for those people who again who felt they were kind of away, and they were a stoic and they didn't really know it, or at least trying to work towards it. So that is definitely adding a great new option for a lot of people who are looking for something that is a little bit more pragmatic and focused on their day to day lives as well.
Yeah. I think Yeah, I read that you're looking into cognitive behavioral therapy courses too, or have you already taken some? Do you think that's something that's going to help your coaching in a big way? I know that CBT obviously derived initially from Stoic principles, and was an REBT as well, likes of Albert Ellis, who founded one or both of them, I think. But have you noticed any similarities in the training you've been doing with that in comparison to what you've learned about Stoicism?
Most definitely, and it was also when we spoke to Donald Robertson. He's obviously a CBT practitioner, and he mentioned that link. He has a couple of really interesting articles out there as well. He mentioned it in his book also. I can't remember, Stoicism, The Art of Happiness, which was a preceder of How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, where he makes that connection a lot. So I figured I want to be better at this. And if there's a lot of link, and you can read it when you do like CBT courses, and I'm not a CBT practitioner by far, that like I'm not even there yet. I don't want to call myself that, but you see the value in it. That is, there's a far more structured way of looking at it when working with people and coaching them as a peer to peer kind of practice that we do. But when you have those skills, it just makes you a little bit better, and it gives you far more insights. And what also in the Stoics, how far ahead they were in the times of understanding the human mind and how it all worked. The link between feelings, thoughts, and behavior, how they really change each other, and how they really interact with each other. And changing one can really help you change the others in a better way. If you apply them in a positive way, they can help all of the others kind of move upward.
Yeah, I think that's a really useful aspect of Donald Robertson's books, is that he weaves CBT into a lot of his Stoicism material, um, in terms of exercises and things like that. And he also has the book, The Philosophy of CBT, which is probably more in depth than what his more popular books are. Kind of like the Inner Citadel would probably be something that you would come to at a later point when you maybe have a firmer understanding of the fundamentals. Um, do you think there's much room for evolution in Stoicism in the modern sense? Do you think that, how do you see the philosophy changing as its popularity seems to keep increasing? Are there changes that we can make to it as people who are sharing it in the modern world, do you think?
Well, first, it would be good to have the right kind of Stoic philosophy out there, right? Sometimes I wonder if Stoicism is actually making a resurgence or something that looks like Stoicism, which you see the kind of the Broicism, the manosphere, right? Is all based on like the outward things, while Stoicism is really a philosophy about knowing yourself, having that deep introspection. But that's something that we should start on first. And but then when you look at some of the people on those Facebook groups or out there, who there's different kind of groups who are more orthodox Stoicism, right? Epictetus said this, so this is how it is, right? Well, we don't really know what Epictetus said, because Arian wrote the discourses and the handbook, so it's all kind of secondhand already. So that's to be judged. And I do think that we have a responsibility and a duty to make it and shape it into what it is now, the world that we live in. Although so many similarities, and obviously we have the basic principles, we have the basic ideas of Stoicism, but we don't know exactly what Zeno meant, or Chrysippus, or Cleanthes, because that's really gone. So we do have a point here, of a moment here to shape it. And that's why having conversations with you and reaching out to people in the Stoic community to talk about these things, instead of attacking each other, which sometimes happens, and well, more than often. And I was surprised by that. And whereas like, this is the right idea, this is how it should be done. It's like, okay, who are you? Let's talk about this. Let's see what the real good thing is and how it should be done. And so I think that there's a lot of room there, and a lot of responsibility in that. But how do you view that kind of the situation where it is now, and what could be done still towards Stoicism?
I think that, yeah, I agree. That's a great point. That it's probably more incumbent on modern people to get across the most accurate version of Stoicism itself, when there are so many kind of counterfeit versions of it. If you search on YouTube for Stoicism, something will come up where it's like a thumbnail of a muscular, uh, you know, caricature of a philosopher, and the title is like, "Use Stoicism to beat everyone or, you know, to win or, whatever that is. But uh, I think, we've already talked about a couple of the misconceptions here in terms of um, Stoicism being more about sociability than a lot of people would imagine. And also, Stoicism isn't about suppressing your emotions as well, which is an important thing to let people know, because that's probably the first thing most people think of when they hear the word. Um, and I think Massimo Pigliucci as well sort of updates some of the older texts. His book, I think it's A Guide to a Happy Life, something like that. Is like a modern updating of Epictetus' Enchiridion. So there's probably scope for modernizing the language a bit in that way. I'd probably like to see that done with Seneca's letters. Actually, I'm not sure if anyone's done that, but a lot of the translations we have are quite old, and the language is quite archaic. But yeah, in terms of kind of responsibilities and things like that, I think it's important for us to try and be as accurate as possible, but also apply it to the world as it is today, because obviously a lot of things have changed since Stoicism first um, was founded.
Yeah, most definitely. And you have a Breakfast with Seneca, which is kind of it's a little bit similar to How to Be Stoic by Massimo Pigliucci, where he has like the right, I can't remember the name, but where he has like conversations with, where he's breakfast with Seneca, pretty much, the kind of going through all these things and looking at the letters. So, but yeah, I agree. There should be a little bit easier way, and maybe I don't know, easier, yeah, just a little bit more better to be interpreted in modern days, right? When we talk about being exiled, being executed, those are the things that hopefully will not really come back again. But yeah, but we should be able to interpret them in a more modern setting.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously we have a lot of books that draw from that wisdom anyway, and maybe come up with their own, interpretations of that, likes of Ryan Holiday. And, there seems to be more and more Stoic books coming out every week, whereas a few years ago, it was very limited. So it's probably a good thing, as long as we say, it's being represented in the right way. Um,
And
so we
also
talked a
what
bit
you
about,
d- but also what you do with your podcast, right? Those are also the new mediums that we have at our disposal, where you have your shorter episodes really delving into these topics, which is really good for people to listen to and hear it from a different voice. That's what we're trying to do as well, just looking at common things and not really looking at it from the academic side, which is already kind of out there, where people look at it as like, oh, this is, let's analyze all these words. No, let's look at it from how it is really used into common day life. And I think that's what you do well in your episodes, and we try to approach it from a different angle, but do the kind of the similar thing of bringing it back to reality.
I think most people want to know, how can they apply it? You know, you may be able to explain a topic, but how does that come to life on a day-to-day basis? It's great knowing about eudaimonia or, any other Stoic term, but what does it actually mean to the person who wants to put it into practice? And I think that's can be difficult to explain sometimes, but that's kind of the aim, really, is to explain that in a simple way that people can understand, and that I can understand myself. So yeah, we talked a little bit about Via Stoica, as you just said there in your podcast and things. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about that? What you're doing with Via Stoica, and what led you to set that up? Did that come after your coaching, presumably?
Yeah, so I started with the Stoic Padawan, and then I started coaching there. But I met up with Brendan and Bryce through the Spaces on X, which we've been hosting for almost 2.5 years, pretty much every week. We've had a little bit of a hiatus over the last few months as we were kind of reshuffling, but we're getting back to them. And I actually went to Panama to visit Brendan, and I stayed with them for a few months, which was great. And Bryce, and I'd actually started out, was funny. We had these spaces where we had like 2 hour talks about Stoicism with people, and then we would call each other and have another hour and a half talk about Stoicism. we figured like we got to record this. There's so much more we can talk about. Let's do something with it, right? Because we can reach a wider audience. So that's when we started the podcast, which was first Street Stoics, and we renamed it to Via Stoica afterwards. And then when I went to Via to Panama, we were just kind of talking, the three of us, and we felt like let's make something out of this, right? I know some things, but I'm not really enough capable. I'm not really. I like to work with other people, right? So let's set up a company, and we came, with Via Stoic, and that's where we kind of started working together. The podcast, but the blogs, the website, and also the coaching, really making it a little bit more accessible and easier to find people. And it's always nice to have others to brainstorm with and to kind of work things out a little bit better, and that's what we wanted to do from there. So yeah, where we are taking it next, I don't know, we were looking at maybe doing some courses, or I'm actually going to be co-teaching the Stoic week, but that's going to be in Dutch, as I'm from the Netherlands. So I'm going to help out another guy that I met who's doing Stoic coaching in the Netherlands. So that's really nice to have these kind of evolution in how you can really participate in building this philosophy out. And again, as you said, once you start teaching, you start to learn so much faster. You have to make sure that you have it all right, and that's something that I really use to improve my knowledge and to make sure that I know it all as much as I can, right, before I go out and do these things and share the knowledge.
And just on your spaces on X, have you noticed any difference in kind of your audience or just the platform in general since it's changed from Twitter?
We've actually been no, at the beginning it was kind of the same. We had kind of a community base there as well. But it did change a little bit over the last few months. I don't know yet. It changed for me a little bit, and also because the reach was, I wanted to make expand a little bit more. The best thing for me about the spaces was it really taught me how to articulate myself better, get these ideas better on the grip, and share it with people, and also interact, because it's live space for people who don't know. These are live conversations where people join, they can request a mic, and it's also difficult to be the host because you have to control it all a little bit. And as people know online, it's not always easy to control the people who join these spaces. But no, we've built a nice community there with some really understanding people who are participating and joining. And as we start to diversify a little bit on where we want to go, we've paused a little bit on that. I was also taking a lot of our time. At one point I was doing 4 spaces a week, each 2 hours. That's 8 hours a week in the evenings. So that was taking up a lot of time. So we tried to kind of reshuffle that. But it's really nice to just talk to people about this and have that interaction, because you can see what's playing. And as we started out with maybe 5 or 6 guys, but as we went along, so many more women joined the spaces, so many women joined the conversation, that really expanded the outlook that I had on the philosophy, because it just gives a different view on what people need and how they look at it and apply it.
And have you noticed any difference between what men and women want to speak about in terms of Stoicism? Because, if you looked at it in general, you might think that, women might be put off by some of the messages or, some of the false messages, I suppose. But, I've had a similar experience actually. Quite a lot of the subscribers to what is Stoicism, and particularly the people who actually get in touch over email, there's been a lot of women there too who are interested in applying principles and learning more about which books to read and what certain principles mean and things. So yeah, have you noticed any difference in terms of that?
I think a lot of people in general, but especially maybe for women, they're surprised about the social aspect of it, right? That it's actually something that has that interconnectedness, that where we are all together, which is something that they didn't expect from Stoicism, but also the part where it's really founded on gratitude and some from a positive side. Because as you said, if you open YouTube or Google, you put in Stoicism, you see this 12 pack, guy with muscles all over until his ears. And you go and meet someone like that. Even think about, Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, they were not anything like it. So I think that's the biggest surprise that people have had. Even when I went on other podcasts and spoke to people who had no idea about Stoicism, they were all surprised about what such a positive philosophy it is if applied right, that it actually adds more to your life and to the people around you. And I think that that was the biggest surprise, that whenever I speak to people, that they are quite have those misconceptions that it's all about angry men who are, punching through walls and whatever, and that's what makes them feel, good about themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And have you found that with most of the people you interact with related to Stoicism are online? I don't know about you, but I don't know really anyone from where I'm from, or that I know personally who has any interest in Stoicism whatsoever. So I have to go further afield to actually talk about it. Um, is that the same for you?
Oh yeah, that's the blessing of the internet. Like if I would have, like, most of my, family and friends, some of them, they entertain me. It's like, okay, it's nice, and but other people, other friends I've had is like, Benny, just don't even you don't even have to try. It's fine. This is just not my thing, which I respect. There's nothing wrong with it. But then when you go online, that's where you find people, and even searching for just people in your vicinity. Like I travel a lot, so it's very difficult to have that base where you can have those foundations. A lot of the friends that I have are from back in the day, and I make a lot of like new friends, but that's kind of fleeting, come and go. But there are a lot of, like, I was in Dubai the other day. I went back. I've lived there for 5 years. So I went to visit some friends, and there was a philosophy gathering, and that was really nice to talk about it. So people are interested in philosophy and stoicism as well. I met up with some people who are hosting, who were counseling people, and they had stoicism as well as part of their packages, or how they help people. So that is one of the things that really people talk bad about social media a lot of the times, but it can really enrich you if you use it the right way. You get what you put in. That's always what I say. If you want to share something that's positive, and you're gonna get that back as well, as long as you can shield yourself properly from what's out there as well.
Yeah, and you can always turn it off too.
Yeah.
Um, you've been on Substack recently too. Have you any plans for that platform, or are you just sort of testing the water there to see what it's like?
Yeah, I've never used it. I've been trying to a little bit more on LinkedIn as well, just trying to, because it's a little bit better for networking that I found. I've had some, and it's funny that I've been like more into the Dutch community there, which is great, because I haven't really met a lot of Dutch Stoics out there. But yeah, Substack is something that I see that there's a lot more movement of the, like, I don't want to say like the more serious people in Stoicism, but there are more interesting people out there who are not as negative or as righteous as on, for example, Facebook and on those groups. So it's a little bit more positive, that interaction. So I'm definitely going to try and build that out a little bit more. And I've been posting on Instagram and on Twitter, on X, and Substack every day. Like I try to write this little reflection every morning and every evening. It's kind of turned into some kind of poetry, and then to add a visual, I put an AI imaging thingy on it, and I make something nice. And that's something that I've been trying to work on a little bit more, and just to kind of get my thoughts out, which I like. But yeah, I've been trying to get that on Substack, and trying to get it. It's an interesting platform, and I haven't really used it as much as I'm doing now.
Yeah, it seems to be quite a nice audience, and it's probably the one I use most now. I would have been more active on other platforms previously, but not so much now. And it's funny how you're saying about poetry and graphics and things. It's funny how you kind of get into these more creative pursuits. And you, as you said at the start, jack of all trades. You end up being a podcaster and a graphic designer and a poet and a writer. And you know, I always say that I'm not talented in any of those things, but at least I've tried them. Um, but
And one of the things that I've really learned from this journey is that I can teach myself anything. I can learn anything, and it's kind of getting those inhibitions out of your mind where you feel like, oh, I can't do this, right? And that's something that Stoicism teaches you as well. Be confident in yourself. If you really want to do something, you can learn how to do this. I've built my websites by myself. I had no idea how to do that. WordPress was foreign to me, and again, as you said, podcasting, all of those skills, and that's something that I would also like to show people. Is like, if you really want to make your life the way that you want to live it, living in accordance with your natures, as the Stoics say, then do it. And it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it. And you'll feel so much better by doing it. You feel so much more pride and fulfillment when you do the thing that you really want to do. And yeah, maybe that's gonna require you to kind of step down a little bit on the financial side. But yeah, every choice has its consequences. You just got to make sure that the choice that you make is the one that fits you best, and not according to what people want you to do with your life.
Yeah, exactly. That's been one of the kind of welcome side effects for me of doing this, is just having that creative outlet, being able to try new things, and some work, some don't, but you learn what you want to focus on then, and what you can improve on. Obviously, you can't do everything at the same time, but you can narrow down and focus on writing or focus on podcasting, or all the while you're learning more about the topic at hand, and trying to help people too. Um, just before we sort of wrap up here, is there any last message you'd want to share about Stoicism for those who particularly are facing obstacles in their life, which is everyone, I guess, but about how they can face up to their difficulties, and you know ultimately come through them with the help of Stoicism?
I think one of the best reminders that I give myself is that, understanding that I have all the tools that I need to face with the moment, with the present moment. And that's something that I think we often underestimate ourselves, which I do many times as well. I don't know if that's keeping like my ego in check, or just, whatever it is, but we underestimate ourselves, and we also tend to think too much ahead, that Seneca quote of "we suffer more in imagination than we do in reality." That's something that a lot of people tend to do. Yeah, you can look ahead and kind of set a course, right? That's why the Stoics have this sage figure in mind, like this is where I want to go. Set that course for yourself. But when the obstacles come, remind yourself that they're not as bad as they are, and you can deal with them, with everything that you have right now, and find support if you need to. Friends, family, maybe Stoic coaching, or listen to podcasts, or read the books that you need to give yourself that support in those moments. But yeah, we are capable of dealing far. We are so adaptable as human beings, and it often looks worse from the outside than when you're dealing with it for yourself. And remember what's in your control. Don't label the things too fast. And I think that that's something that we do quickly, to say like this is bad, but you don't even know what the outcome of it's going to be. So just focus on the present moment and tell yourself, okay, what is my next course of action? What do I need to do right now? If you feel overwhelmed, just break it down and say, what do I need to do? Even if it's sleeping, if you're waking up at night and you're having your thoughts of oh, I need to do this, then do it. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning, send that email, do it, whatever you need to do, because you're not going to get any sleep anyway. But if you don't, then, remind yourself it's night, you've got to sleep. And that it sounds a lot easier than it is. That's another thing about Stoicism. It all sounds a lot easier, but practicing it and trying it every day at a time does help. And it's those little steps that help you make that progress. And that's what it's all about, just making progress and being a better person.
Yeah, it's a great summary, and try to remind myself too that if you've made it to this point, then you've at least dealt adequately with what's come before. So you've something to be proud of. Um, just finally, Benny, thanks for joining me. And where can we find you? Where can we find Via Stoica? Where's the best place to interact with you online?
Yeah, so Via Stoica, you can go to viastoica.com. That's Stoica.com. That's where you can find pretty much everything. The blog, which I write every week. There's summaries on the discourses of Epictetus. I've almost finished book one. Got a few left, which has been a quite big project of mine. I've got all the quotes there by Epictetus with the references. So I've been working diligent on that. And just after all I do take the criticism to heart, but it helps me to improve myself, which is a good thing. But no, and we are on on social medias again with the Via Stoica. Just add Via Stoica. If you want to find us on the spaces on X, we're probably going to host them again twice a month now. Just so you can find them there. On Instagram, Benny_Via Stoica. But yeah, pretty much just Google Via Stoica and you'll find me or my name. You can Google that, and I'm out there. But and the best way to contact me is to send me a DM, or send a on any of those social media outlets, and I'll probably get back to you as soon as I can.
Great. That's awesome. Thanks very much for joining me, Benny.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's really a pleasure to to speak to you, and I always love listening to your podcast. So definitely keep that going.
Thank you. Appreciate it.